Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Latest news of the couple of days that caught everyone's attention is Russia being pounded harder than Ivan pounding his friend after a couple of bottles of a really bad vodka. We have seen Ukrainian armed forces doing incredible job. One being American Bradley infantry fighting vehicle absolutely hammering and smashing in a close combat Russian most modern T-90M tank, which is like the pinnacle of tank destruction. Supposedly advertised as the tank that was supposed to defeat Abrams, is being absolutely destroyed by the Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicle. I'm going to link a link to that particular video in a video description, but answering the questions that you usually ask me, like, Georgie, where do you have the sources? Where do you have the videos? Everything what I'm saying here, or at least like 90% of it, is appearing in our Discord. Join our Discords. There are dedicated channels for the update in Ukraine, and you will have all of the videos and news sources, at least the majority ones that I'm talking about here. But second, and probably even arguably most important, what was pounded by Ukrainians of the Russian vehicles was the two major planes that Ukraine shut down in the area of Berdyansk, which is right over here above the Azov Sea. One of the planes was the plane that was carrying a lot of the officers, and it was basically like a staff plane. It was a plane where generals were discussing the strategies and tactics that Russians should take on a battlefield and receiving a lot of the intelligence information. That plane supposedly was shut down. It sustained damage. People on the flight definitely also got injured, potentially killed, at least from what we heard. But later on, that plane was able to land in one of the airports in Russia. There was pictures shown by the Russian Telegram channels showing only tail part of the plane. But knowing how Russians are showing images, usually they are usually trying to build a certain narrative, and in this case was the same. They were showing, oh, it's only the tail was damaged, like the rest of the plane is clear. Well, if the rest of the plane is clear and ready, well, why don't you just show it? Why would you just show the tail part of it? And it's obviously just to build a narrative. So there's a high probability that this plane is not going to be flying that often. But that plane is probably less important than the second one. The second plane that got shut down was the A-50 plane. It was an AWACS analog of US AWACS plane, and it's a plane with like a big radar dish, so it's there to fly around high in the sky and pick up like and do the radar thingy to pick up the signatures of any kind of flying objects in a long distance. So to help Russian anti-air systems, to help Russian battle systems, to help identify friend and foe systems, stuff like that. So to help basically see what's happening around in the battlefield. And what I saw in the last couple of days reporting on the situation is underestimating just the gravity of this plane being downed. Because in all seriousness, in the same way that the Moskva, the Russian flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, was sunk, hitting this plane and shooting it down from the skies was pretty much, the gravity is very much comparable to that of the Moskva. After the Soviet Union collapsed, all of the knowledge that about how to build these planes, how to repair them, and so on, was pretty much lost. It's a little bit like a lot of the components that were used to build these planes were not present. Russia has modernized certain planes, but they were using Western components, a lot of them. So damaging even single one of these planes is, right now, to be honest, is considered to be completely irreplaceable. But what I've heard is people stating, well, they shut down a 350 million plane. which is a completely incorrect way to say, because 350 million is a replacement cost. But the replacement cost, if you don't have the technology to replace it, if you don't have the components to replace it, if you maybe don't even have the engineers that even know how to build this kind of plane, and you need to maybe outsource or like try to find high-ranking engineers, because remember, a lot of really high-ranking and high skilled labor run away from Russia. That becomes not 350 millions. That becomes a lot more, if even it possible. Right now, we definitely know that Russia has not repaired the previous this kind of plane that was damaged in Belarus last year with a kamikaze drone that attacked its dish. That plane never appeared again. What we know that after the Soviet Union, there was about 8 of these planes that were technically enough, not flight ready, but at least in somewhat adequate condition. But we ever saw over the history of Russia, independent Russia, because this Russia is not the same as the Soviet Union, is not the same as the Imperial Russia, it's different countries over the period of history. And in modern Russia, we only saw ever 5 of these planes take off. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, only 4 of these planes were ever taking off, or even 3. But I'm going to say with 4 just to be secure, because I see here different numbers. One of them were taking out in Belarus, and in latest months, in latest kind of couple of like a half a year or so, Russia was mostly having just 2 of them in the air. Now, we don't know whether they were having the same 2 planes in the air at all times, or they were shifts that they were taking, but there were just basically a couple of them flying. So downing just 1 of them, even if we take that there are 4 of them still operational, that's like 25% of Russian long-range detection planes. It's massive. It's incredibly massive. It's a huge degradation of the Russian capabilities of seeing what's happening in the skies. I talked about this, that Ukraine is definitely aiming to reduce Russian capabilities in the anti-air department to ability to track aerial targets, with F-16s coming closer and closer in this year. Then we might expect that Ukraine is going to be more and more aggressively going after anything that can even try to harm the F-16s in the sky, just to make the job for them easier to take over the skies. I think by this point, this strategy is absolutely obvious, and the fact that Ukrainians did this trap for Russians to capture these planes, to destroy these planes, I think it's genius. And Russians obviously reporting that it was themselves that shut down this place, which is absolutely the story that cannot like hold together by the toughest of glues that you can even try, because they are reporting that they misjudged that this was planes, that they thought that these were drones. I'm sorry, like, or sometimes they said missiles, like some of the reports were missiles, some of the drones, but still, a missile or a drone has absolutely different signature as an object compared to the massive spy plane in the sky. Like, it's just absolutely different. I could understand if they would judge, like, maybe it was a civilian plane, something like this, but it wasn't that. Like, it's not even close. What we do know, though, and this is my speculation, this has not been confirmed, but this is something that has been done by Ukrainians before. When Ukrainians shut down a couple of planes, I believe it was 3 + 1 over the Black Sea, just a couple of weeks ago around the Kherson area, at that moment we knew how the operation was ongoing, because Russians have really big problem in identification of a friend and foe. Their technologies are really poor. Ukrainian aviation has been known to abuse this kind of things to sneak into Russian rear. This was most famously known with a famous video where a couple of Ukrainian helicopters just flew into Russia and destroyed, I believe it was oil processing factory, and then they flew away back into Ukraine. Absolute ballsy move. But since then, we know that the Russians have adapted, and they've attempted to compensate by having very standardized flight plans. And what I believe is, and again, my speculation is that these spy planes, because they were considered like Ukraine just cannot reach them. Like they're flying so far away from the front lines that Ukraine took certain risks. They were able to get their rare and expensive long-range anti-air systems close enough to the front line where they risked them for sure. But then because they were able to understand what is the trajectory, what is the flight path of these Russian planes, they were then knew as soon as they reached kind of the area of Berdyansk, which is the closest to the front lines with Ukraine, they just shut them down. I honestly believe this story, but I don't have any proof about this. But I do think that it's a little bit more believable than Russians just got drunk and just shut down their spy planes. Oh, and by the way, still no investigation started in Russia, so they're not even looking for who's at fault there. I've talked about the last subject for a while now, so let's just have a discussion today, and I'm going to cover the front lines maybe some other time, guys, okay? So another topic that is interesting to know is that Russians are reporting that they're having issues with their drones. This is specifically what I was talking about in some of my recent videos where I discussed about the Ukrainian drone technology and how Ukrainian drone technology is advancing, that the fact that Ukrainian drone technology producers are not centralized, Ukraine is able to have a lot more diverse drone fleet with a lot more innovation, and it's a lot harder for Russia to fight it. Whereas the Russians right now are saying that because Russians have put them on a basically factory floor production for these drones, the standards and quality for these drones are actually lacking because Russians are really pushing hard to make sure that they come cheap and at scale and fast. So the quality of drones has been quite poor. And most importantly, the countermeasures that Ukrainians are adapting are more than successful because these drones are coming out, yes, but it's the same types of drones. So if you find some effective countermeasures to these drones, then it's easier for the opposing party, in this case Ukrainians, to fight against that. And that's the trade-off that you get for having the scalable, centralized production. Yes, you get a lot of something, but it's going to be something like if it's a high tech, especially if we're talking about the innovative edge technology, it will not guarantee you innovative tech. It will guarantee you scale, maybe size, maybe quantity, but not the edge over the enemy in technology wise, because it's just going to get canceled out. And Ukrainians are doing exactly that. They're developing drones en masse. They already started certain programs for certain drones that have proven themselves long term, but I do believe that Ukrainians will continue adapting their drone technologies, and we see more crazy and crazy ideas. At some point, Russians will just adapt some new things themselves, but they're still going to be always lacking. Maybe the quantity, as always, is going to be there. And finally, a bit of a rant, because I see certain YouTubers, I'm not going to name names here, but certain YouTubers and media personalities are still continuously saying that the Western powers are looking to get some kind of a negotiated peace with Russia. I know that this narrative has been popular for a while. This narrative has been pushed a lot by the media. However, on my personal level, and this is a discussion topic for sure, but I just don't see it. I see significant support from the European allies. We see countries in Europe stepping up. We see UK pledging defense guarantees for Ukraine before Ukraine joins NATO. We see UK pledging additional support for Ukraine with biggest package that they ever delivered ever. We see the Nordics, Baltics, Poland stepping up, increasing deliveries to Ukraine as much as they can. We see that Germany is again pledging over 7 billion euros to support for Ukraine. And I know there is a little bit of discussion about the Taurus bill, but there's more nuance to the story. I don't want to go in depth, but don't take it at the face value. Like Germany didn't exclude Taurus for now. It's a separate issue. Let's talk about it some other time. But France is also just now pledging that they're increasing production of equipment to Ukraine. Romania saying that a lot of their production is going to Ukraine. Bulgaria stating that majority of their production is going to Ukraine. Even Slovakia, Fico turning around, allowing exports of weapons to Ukraine for profit, obviously, for sale, but still. So I don't see the support for the negotiating peace. I see a lot of media and propaganda narratives and certain marginal groups pushing for this narrative, but I don't see it. I just don't. I see people, specifically in Europe, having a slower than I would wish realization that this is existential for Europe. That's why this channel exists. That's why I keep asking everyone to kind of repeat the message. Because we in Europe, like if you lived in Europe, in European Union specifically, you know how slow the gears of this machine are turning, how slow we are to implement any kind of change. It takes forever. Our negotiations, our discussions, oh my God, it's legendary. So the fact that we are not there yet, we are not fully supporting Ukraine, like and not everyone besides like Baltics, besides some of the Nordics are stating that they will support Ukraine until it wins. But we are definitely, absolutely certainly moving into that direction. We only see from the European Union and the European allies, UK, everyone else, more and more increase for Ukraine. So the argument that like Europe is just looking for a way how to sell off Ukraine into some kind of peace deal, I just don't see it. If we talk about US, it's a problematic area. US is very deeply politicized. It's a country that's living in its own crisis period. It's a country in which there is still a lot of the internal conflict. We see that. And unfortunately, for US, internal problems are coming in between it and everything else in the world. It's problematic, but in my perspective, it's more of a loss for US themselves. Because by not supplying weapons and not helping Ukraine, not standing up to the external agreements that are dealt with, is going to make everyone that is an ally to US ask themselves a question. What does it mean to be an ally of US? And with Ukraine just being abandoned, stalled, and not being helped for months and months and months because someone is citing a bullshit narrative about that we have internal problems, so we cannot dedicate 0.003% of a budget, which is like nothing. I believe it's 5% of the defense budget. Like, just think about the naming, okay? So, defense budget. It's money allocated to be spent to increase the defense of US. So if there is money that is being sent to Ukraine and Ukraine is ensuring more defense for for US and US allies, that is like the direct purpose of the defense budget. It's in the name, it's in the definition. It doesn't matter how much money is being sent to Ukraine. If it's contributing to US defense, that means the money is spent on the specific concrete purpose, ensuring defense of US. But the point that I'm making here, if I'm not going to go into politics and a discussion about what it's going to cost US, the point is that I want you to ask yourself, if we try to kind of think about if this is not an election year, if we don't take the internal controversial and take out some marginal groups that are really trying to go for political points, can you put a hand on your heart and tell me that people and politicians in US would rather see some kind of a peace negotiation with Ukraine or with Russia and Russia winning and having a winner, or would rather they would send ammunition and equipment to Ukraine to see Russians getting burned and see more videos of Bradleys absolutely abolishing any kind of modernized Russian equipment? I'm thinking the answer is pretty clear. There is a clear majority and clear support inside of US for Ukraine. It's just the internal problems are preventing and paralyzing US. And I'm really hoping my friends in US were going to solve this out. But again, I don't see the narrative of we just need to make a deal with Putin. What I see is that we are really, really busy with like trying to figure out who we are and what we want. So we cannot be the armory of the democracy. Unfortunately, we're busy, occupied, taking a smoking break. It doesn't look good, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be some kind of a deal with Russia. In any case, I hope the situation in US will improve. I am glad to see Europeans step up. We still have a long way to go. So please don't stop. Please continue sending mails to your direct representatives, to your EU members of Congress. Specifically this year, we have EU election parliamentary. Vote for parties and people that support Ukraine. Don't vote for some dumbasses. Slava Ukraini, guys, join the Discord. Go to the ukrainematters.shop to buy some nice things for you. We will support the Ukrainian armed forces. We will support Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, and I'll see you guys next time.